go here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Emer Lachnan. I am Director of Software Engineering at Slalom, Ireland. It's wonderful to be here in Vegas. I'm a long way from home, a little bit jet lagged, so bear with me. At Slalom, we roll out a lot of generative AI applications, including Q. And we have seen the benefits that this tool can bring to developers over the past couple of years. I've worked in software engineering my whole career, so I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I spent most of my time in a big tech company, one of Amazon's rivals, we won't say who, but we've seen the evolution of software engineering over those years. We've seen things like IDEs and smart IDEs auto-suggesting code for developers. But AI-enhanced engineering really is a game changer. At first, when Amazon Q came out, or Code Whisperer as it was then, we felt, like a lot of organizations, we felt a bit skeptical of its actual impact. Was this tool really going to make developers' lives easier? Was it going to make software engineering faster? So what we decided to do at Slalom was do an internal A/B test. We got 4 teams of software engineers, 2 of them in London, 2 of them in Denver. We made sure that every team had similar levels of seniority across each team, similar skill sets. We gave 2 of the teams access to Amazon Q, 2 did not. Then we gave them an identical backlog, an identical code base, and we said, go. Okay, develop those backlogs and let's see what happens. What we found was that all the developers who had Q were somewhere between 20 and 50% faster than the developers who did not. And what we noticed was the more junior developers were the ones who saw the greatest increase in velocity, which makes sense. They had more knowledge to gain from the tool. So it was a real game changer, especially for the junior developers. One other thing we noticed that kind of surprised us at the time was it was not just about velocity, but developers actually reported higher levels of satisfaction and engagement while using the tool. They found that they spent less time doing those more mundane tasks and more time in the flow doing interesting work. What we found over the years since we started rolling this out is that bringing Amazon Q into each phase of the product development lifecycle accelerates and enhances both the speed and the quality of everything that we've been co-creating with our customers. It's available across many interfaces, so it's not just in the IDE, it's in the AWS console, it's in AWS documentation, code catalogs, and it's available through a chat interface in Slack and Teams as well. So what this does is it really allows developers to get the answers to their questions and get the assistance they need wherever they are without losing context and losing the flow. So with this broadening of the AI capabilities across this entire software development lifecycle, we see a whole host of benefits for engineers. From the start, if they want to learn about new technologies, they can go to the AWS console or AWS documentation, ask about new technologies that they haven't learned before. They can do the same thing in the IDE with the chat feature. They can ask about a code base. They can ask about a technology. We found that this really helps especially onboard new developers when they need to learn a new code base fast. And then when you need to plan a feature, you can use the chat feature to ask Q to help you, and it will come back with a little roadmap, a little plan of how you can build a feature. And then, of course, you can use the auto-suggest to suggest code for you, and you can use the chat feature then to have a little back and forth conversation about the code that it suggested for you. You can augment it through the chat feature in real time. Then when you're reviewing the code, you can ask it to explain it for you. You can ask it to suggest improvements. You can ask it to refactor the code for you. So it's really helpful at every phase. When you get to monitoring and testing, there's a built-in security scanner you can use, and that will help find potential security vulnerabilities. It can also generate unit tests for you, helping developers get better code, better test coverage, and higher quality tests. Maintenance. I've yet to meet a developer that enjoys maintaining code, so why not use a tool like Q? Q can help you refactor code. It can help you understand code that no one understands anymore. I know there's lots of old code bases out there where no one understands what the code actually does. You can use Q to help explain the code for you. We've seen really good use cases of Amazon Q in things like modernization. Modernization projects are generally really big projects that no one wants to do. People don't necessarily want to sign off budget for. But with something like Q, you can really, really speed it up. It's much less effort for developers. Again, go in, understand the code base, ask it to help you convert a monolith into a microservices, ask it for a plan to help you do that if that's what you want to do. You can ask it to upgrade the language from one version to another. There's a feature called Q Transform that will allow you to do that. You can even ask it to help you translate from one language to another, and it will really help speed up the process. So not only does it accelerate engineering by making it faster to code, it also expedites planning by allowing users to go in and get help on AWS features. Like I said, it also helps test. You can even generate documentation with it. So we've seen productivity increases of about 22% when we roll this out to customers. We also see quality generally go up. And the reason for that is it can generate tests for you, so you can get higher test coverage and better quality tests. It can also auto-generate documentation for you, which means the documentation actually gets written. And that we see over time, that leads to higher quality code as well, especially when other developers need to go in and change or augment the code later. But most of all, we see this real satisfaction with developers using the tool. They're able to spend much, much more time in the flow doing interesting work. So you can see this is not just a code suggestion tool anymore. The benefits of AI have been extrapolated across the entire software development lifecycle. The potential for productivity gains is huge here, but it's not just about productivity. This is about developer experience. As developers, we really don't enjoy doing those mundane, repetitive tasks over and over, and Q can take those away from you. Unit testing, documentation. And what developers really enjoy doing, they can spend more time on, and that's solving really complex, difficult problems. So thank you. I'm going to hand you over to Justin, who's going to talk about leveraging Q to accelerate next-generation data science platform.
Thank you, Emer. So my name is Justin. I'm a cloud solutions architect out of Slalom, and like Emer mentioned, I'm going to talk today about how we at Slalom are using AWS's GenAI tools, specifically Q Developer, to help us build out a new data science platform at a large agricultural company based out of St. Louis. So this story starts about 2 years ago when we actually lost the original bid for this project. And I know many of you might be thinking that sounds like kind of a sad story, but I promise it gets better. So at the time, we were still kind of highly engaged with the customer and other strategic opportunities, so we got to kind of see firsthand the way that the project went down in phase one. So the competitor that we lost to, they are a different consulting company. There's many consulting companies out there if you're not familiar. There's also many ways to go about tackling a large scale development effort. And so this company kind of took the mindset of many hands make light work. And if you're not familiar with that idiom, it kind of means the more people working on a project, the faster you can do a project, which for those of you who have been in the software industry long enough knows not always the case. In fact, oftentimes it ends up kind of doing the opposite of what you're trying to do. And so this company brought in about 20 engineers, broke them into pods specializing in ML, data engineering, infrastructure, and then platform and API development. And so as time went on, about 8 months in, they were running behind deadlines. The things getting generated, the features that each pod were building were misaligned, and as we came in to see the code base, ended up realizing many of the developments had to get rewritten to really function together as a cohesive platform. So the client realized they probably needed to shift strategy, and so they brought us in, we reassessed the platform, we took note of the fact that a lot of the key components of the platform had tight interdependencies, so parallelizing the work didn't really get a lot of individual gains. So when we came in to put our project team together, we kind of took a different approach of figuring out how we can, kind of in a single threaded manner, most efficiently expedite each individual workflow. And so instead of 20 people with very specialized skill sets, we brought in 6 kind of more generalized platform and API engineers, and that's where we brought in Q to really help us allow those engineers to flex into roles that they might not be able to do otherwise. So we had API engineers writing more data engineering, ML type code, infrastructure engineers that were leaning into software development and ML. And what that allowed us to do is we could really make the best utilization of the individual resources we have and kind of work in terms of like computer architectures with the largest single thread on our process versus trying to split things up into like a multi-threaded approach. And so 8 months later, I'm happy to say that we've completed the first 2 releases of this platform, and we're in progress of putting together the plan for 2025 to set up the next 3. And so a little more about this platform that we're building. So it's built on AWS's ML and Gen AI tools, and the goal is really to help data scientists build, train, package, and deploy models to production as fast as possible. And so why is that important for this specific company? As a company whose one of their major goals is literally to try to help end world hunger, having these innovations happen faster, having the research and development cycle quicker, allows them to get products out to farmers faster, to do things like better use their agricultural resources, optimize water distribution, helps their chemists and biologists re-engineer seeds and pesticides to fight newer diseases and insects coming, all of which leads to better crop harvests, but also a lower impact on the environment for a lot of these things. So one of the major use cases for this platform, and one of the things that helped Amazon Q kind of shine most for us, was a multi-language SDK that we've been building for the data scientists. And the goal of this SDK is really to obfuscate a lot of the complex processes needed for model development. So things like cross-cloud and cross-AWS account access to data sources, IAM security, governance, data caching and lifecycle management, things that data scientists don't always think about during their model development cycles, and we don't want them spending time thinking about. And this SDK was really a major selling point on our platform for most of the data science community compared to the previous platforms that they've been working on. And so as we were building it, we wanted to make sure that it would be efficient and extensible. And so with the various languages that data scientists use, the various frameworks, we had R, Python, Julia, we wanted something that we could kind of write once and generate anywhere. And so we took the approach that a lot of SDKs nowadays do, where we had kind of a core SDK that encompassed most of the kind of heavy lifting logic for the SDK. And then we wrote client wrappers in R and Python that kind of exposed that functionality out to data science in their native languages. And so we chose Go for the core SDK components because it's what we were writing the API platform in, it's what we had the most depth of experience in. And then with Amazon Q Developer on our side, we were able to let our same API engineers who might not have depths of experience in Python or R kind of flex into those roles, lower the context switching overload from switching between Go and Python and R. And all that together ended up with faster delivery of that as a whole product, because we could have the same people working on the core SDK, then flexing into the client SDK, so we don't have engineers waiting on one portion of the code to get written before they can start their job. So it also improved the user experience of the platform. We were able to ensure all the SDKs function the same way. It was all written by the same people, so you could expect similar operations between all 3. And then we were also able to leverage Q Developer to help make it a more user-friendly experience from like a documentation and integration perspective. So Q Developer can help you auto-generate doc strings for your code. So since this was going to be a consumable SDK that we were going to give folks, we wanted to ensure that we had robust doc strings. We needed user examples that people could look to say, okay, hey, this is how I use this code for accessing BigQuery from GCP or S3 buckets and other AWS accounts. And then user guides that we publish on our like internal documentation page that kind of also outline the user flows of the SDK. So all those things kind of came together to allow us to deliver this faster and more effectively than kind of some of the previous approaches. Now, like any set of projects, there are a lot of things that we learned from these projects that we would like to share to you. So I'm going to send it back over to Emer to share some of her takeaways from their project.
Yeah, so like I said, we've rolled this out across lots of different companies now. What we found is the most difficult pain point to get over is how different this is to actually writing code by hand. Prompt engineering is a huge skill that people need to learn, how to interact with the large language model, with the tool, in order to get the best results. A couple of other tips. When you roll it out, think about what you want to get from the tool and make sure you figured out how to measure it. Measure speed in whatever way you measure your software velocity today. Find something that you can baseline, something that's already consistent, and also make sure you keep an eye on your quality. Really important. We usually see quality go up, but you want to really make sure your developers, especially your junior developers, are not just accepting what the tool says without checking that it actually makes sense and it's doing what you want it to do. It's an assistant, it's not an engineer. Target pain points. So have a think up front about what you want to actually use the tool for. So I've mentioned modernization, maintenance, unit testing. These are some of what we call the high value use cases for Q. So if you really identify what they are, you'll get the most value from the tool. And invite your developer community to give feedback and be part of that process. It is a different way of working, and it's really good to get ideas and thoughts and concerns from your developers before you actually roll it out.
Awesome. And then obviously, I trust you all can read the last three, so accelerating documentation we've discussed, reusing resources and sharing knowledge, and integrating safeguards. These kind of two takeaways came from an overarching theme that we found when we were integrating Q, is in that bringing on the senior developers first with Q and trying to drive adoption there really helps set the stage for how the junior developers end up using. And for any of you that work with senior developers or happen to be a senior developer yourself, you might be aware that not all senior developers are sort of confident in AI-assisted coding tools. Many think they either can't solve complex enough solutions for the types of things that senior developers work on, or they've seen kind of some of the outputs and negative outputs of AI-assisted coding and think it's just not worth the time to spend on it. But what we actually found is that when senior developers start using it, when they, again, let that take care of some of the mundane tasks like converting an IAM policy from JSON into Terraform, it helps them focus on more productive tasks and actually gives you the highest return on investment per hour based on salaries and whatnot. And when you have them kind of setting the stage, setting the guardrails, setting the best practices that your junior developers end up using, you don't end up with 100 file PRs of junior developers shoving AI-generated code into a pull request. You have them better able to use the software and actually get the promises that Q says it can deliver. So as you can see, there's a lot of promise in Q, so I encourage all of you to look and find ways to incorporate it into your projects. And if you have more questions or you'd like to talk more about it, we will be in the Slalom booth just right over there, right after this. And we also probably have time for one question if anyone has a question now. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.